morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where Netflix just yesterday released their Q1 report, which is something they release for shareholders to talk about how the company is doing. And since Netflix is so secretive as to how they're doing, it's one of the few insights, official insights, because, there are companies that say, oh, we poll Netflix users to find out what they're doing. But this is really the only official source of what's actually going on inside Netflix, which I think has kind of become the Marvel Studios of television, right? They're just so full of win. They're so far ahead of everyone else. It's ridiculous. And if all goes according to plan, they'll become a force to be reckoned with in movies as well. It's interesting because they also have a problem. Well, Hollywood has a problem with Netflix. Netflix is like, we're good. We're doing great, at least for now. Because as I'm sure you've heard, they hire away a lot of talent very aggressively by offering them a much higher payday. So that's been a real thorn in the side for a number of other more traditional media or television establishments as well, in addition to the ratings problem. All right, so let's talk about the report and the light it sheds on Netflix, how they're doing now, their future, and a little bit, how Netflix's own unique situation works, right? All right, so the first headline to come out of it was that they missed their new subscriber projection, which I thought was really, someone could say, I thought it was nitpicky. Someone could say, oh, well, it shows the beginning of maybe a backslide, or, this is the beginning of a reverse, a full-on reversal, or even just slowed growth. But, well, let's discuss, all right? So they were projected at 1.59 million more subscribers in the first quarter, and they only added 1.42 million domestic subscribers. So that's, again, 1.59 was what was projected, 1.42 was the reality. That is over, 0.1, so I can see some concern. But anyway, let's continue. So, if I were Netflix, I would take this very seriously. I wouldn't downgrade the stock. I think it's just something to keep an eye on. And then, this is interesting, overseas subscriptions were projected for 3.68 million and came in at 3.53 million. I think right there, even though the numbers aren't quite where they were expected to be, that's an amazing amount of new subscribers. And this is, again, just a quarter. We're not talking about the whole year. This is Q1. So that's just absolutely stunning that they would add so many subscribers. And remember, that's like $7 a pop, right? So that's why Netflix has so much money to pay with. They're the guy who walks into the casino with a wad of bills rolled up and shows them off to everyone and peels off a couple to get you, hey kid, come work for me. And it's working. They said that one of the reasons that they didn't meet their projections for new subscribers, and this is what's really interesting, is the House of Cards was moved to Q2. It didn't come out in Q1 as they'd hoped. And, of course, they had 13 Reasons Why was very successful in terms of media chatter, but, nobody knows about 13 Reasons Why. A lot of you keep asking me to review it. I'm a little bit hesitant to review, I think, a show on the subject matter of suicide. But we'll talk about Netflix and advertising a little in just a moment, because they're going to increase their advertising budget. But I think that's their Achilles heel, that they don't do anything really to advertise these shows. But what this means is that when they say new subscribers, it's really just people who've subscribed, and they're not necessarily new with that House of Cards explanation. So that means that with Netflix, and maybe some of you can attest that this is what you do down below in the comments, but it means that people subscribe and then unsubscribe when they're not watching. So that's why Netflix aggressively rolls out content, you'll notice, all year round, so that you're like, I got to keep my subscription because I'm going to miss something new. That's why they have the comedy specials. That's why they have these, shows like 13 Reasons Why. But however, they're not advertising them enough, so I think that's problematic. Now look at this, though. This is why the stock didn't really do anything at all. It just kind of stayed at the same level, because their net income jumped from last year in Q1 from 27.7 million to, get this, 178.2 million. Again, that's 27.7 million in the first quarter last year, 2016, and in this quarter they made 178.2 million. That's amazing. Again, in a quarter of the year. They said this because they have increased profit margins, and also they're getting more and more original programming. You know, they said old school licensing deals, of course, they have to give a lot of the money back to the original owner of the material, right? Back to the studio. And the studio wants a big cut of the profits because they have to give stuff back to the actors and the directors. You know, if you're a named talent, you get checks forever on the really big movies. I'm sure, like, for instance, first Ghostbusters, everyone there's getting checks. I mean, Warner Brothers is recently being sued by Sylvester Stallone because he wants his, I think, Demolition Man checks. So that's amazing. So and also what Netflix does is they pay people up front a ridiculous amount of money because there's no back end, because they don't share their numbers. They don't want to tell anyone. So they pay a huge amount of money up front for you just to make the movie or TV show and go away. And so there's no syndication fees, so they get to keep all the money of subscriptions. I wonder how long it will take for eventually them to maybe consider running ads. It would be just so much money, and they could maybe figure out an interesting way to do it. And they might have to, because it was also noted in the report, and it was extrapolated, that they spend, Netflix wasn't like, we spend too much money, but if you looked at the report, you could see that they spend, like as I said, they're just peeling off bills to get what they want. And so they lost 423 million free flow cash in the first quarter. That's unbelievable. So their net income was 178.2, but their free flow cash loss was 423. So that's to pay for original programming and also to acquire programming. They still have some acquired programming on the service. But they said going forward, they're going to spend $1 billion on advertising. That's so much money. Although when you consider how much it costs to advertise like a really big movie, it costs about $100 million or more. That makes sense considering how prolific Netflix is. And speaking of movies, they have a lot of movies coming up, and they're going to want to advertise them to get a lot of attention. Right now, I think they rely almost solely on social media buzz and people saying, hey, you should totally watch this. Although I think that Netflix needs to start realizing that it's such a commitment to watch their shows because they dump them all at once, all the episodes, that it's just really hard. And they're dumping so many, and there's so much competition from other networks and other movies that it's really hard to watch an entire season. And I mean, basically, if you don't watch a Netflix season if you don't binge watch it, you're never going to watch the rest of it. And I think that that's something they should be working a little bit harder to fight. Because if you don't watch the full first season, how are we going to watch the next season, right? I mean, it's going to trickle. It's a problem now, but I think it's going to gain momentum. Also, I thought this was very interesting. They were like, we feel that our subscribers pay for our movies. That's where we get the money to pay everybody such ridiculous amounts of money to make movies for us. So they should get to see them first. But we would really love it if theaters would play our movies simultaneously and let the viewer decide. Because right now, the only theaters that will play Netflix movie is iPick, and that's to get them to qualify for award season. But iPick has very few theaters, so basically you have to watch, like if you want to see War Machine Memorial Day weekend, the new Brad Pitt war comedy, you have to watch it on Netflix. And he specifically mentioned, Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, that they're like Bright maybe, Will Smith's Bright, don't you want that? AMC, don't you want that? Regal? And I thought it was interesting that he mentioned Bright specifically because perhaps they're worried about that. That's such a huge investment for them. It's like a $90 million picture. I think they are like, we need to make some money back, and it might be difficult on the streaming service. So that's the first story of the day, and I'm curious, what do you think of that insight into how Netflix operates? How do you interact with Netflix, and what do you think of Netflix going forward as they try to grow and as they're so prolific? What do you find your Netflix experience has become in terms of what you actually watch, and how much of it that you watch, etc. And with what you plan to watch coming up with all the movies that are coming up and the increased output of shows. All right, so speaking of digital release, and Warner Brothers has been a company leading the charge, particularly now that AT&T is hoping to buy them, although I don't know if that deal is going to go through anymore. But Kevin Tsujihara famously said, I think that we should really shorten the window between theatrical and digital release because I just want people to watch my movies. And he mentioned Fantastic Beasts as one of them because he's like, I want to grow the brand. I just want people to love the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. That's what I'm interested in. J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World is the correct branding now. Because Harry Potter is up there with DC Comics, and the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit is the top franchises at Warner Brothers. And the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, I think they're done. They stretched it out as long as they could, so they really only have DC and Harry Potter. But then the theme park business, and this is where the streaming thing comes in because it's going beyond the movies. Kevin Tsujihara just wants you to love the Wizarding World of Harry Potter so that you will go to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and Universal Orlando and now celebrate Christmas. So this was a big announcement that they're going to do their own Christmas celebration. Christmas in Disney World has been a big thing. Disney World in particular, but also Disneyland, and a lot of people travel there for the holidays. So Universal, and I'm sure Warner Brothers were like, I want a piece of that. So they're going to try and do that this year by launching a Wizarding World of Harry Potter Christmas celebration, which is going to include, of course, decorations in the two lands, a nighttime holiday show projected on Hogwarts Castle with map projection technology. This was something they used to use it even in New York City on the front of Saks Fifth Avenue for Christmas. But one place they use it in particular is Disney World and Disneyland. They use it on both castles. It's a very popular nighttime show there. And even in Disneyland for the Diamond Celebration last summer, they were doing a projection on Main Street even. So that's basically where you take digital mapping projection and you're able to transform buildings and put images on there. It's extremely advanced and it's very effective, and I can vouch, having seen all these shows, that they're amazing. So they're going to do that on Hogwarts Castle. They're going to have Christmas shopping on Diagon Alley, holiday dining in both lands, and also live holiday entertainment. And I think that this is because, again, they're aggressively competing with Disney World and Disneyland. And it's working. Make no mistake, the Fantasyland expansion in Disney World, the Pandora coming to, Avatar Pandora World coming to Animal Kingdom Memorial Day weekend, Star Wars Land, the potential Marvel Land that they want to build in Disneyland because they can't because of Marvel and Islands of Adventure, Universal's theme park in Orlando. They contractually, you can have no other Marvel rides anywhere in the Orlando area. It sucks for Disney. But they want to put it in Disneyland, and make no mistake, that's to compete with what Universal is doing with particularly Harry Potter. And of course, they recently added the Harry Potter land to Universal Studios Hollywood theme park. But speaking of Star Wars Land, that's the third story of the day. And of course, during the Star Wars Celebration weekend, we got some more details on that land that they're building in both parks, coast to coast, Disneyland and Walt Disney World, I think to compete with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. The most interesting thing to me was the technology that they're doing. They did confirm that they're going to have the best lightsaber technology yet to really try and make it seem as much as possible like someone has an actual lightsaber. That's amazing. I worry about how hard it's going to be to get into Star Wars Land. It seems like it's like the most amazing place ever, and I can tell you that getting into Harry Potter Land is difficult. So unless you go like at the deadest time of year. So, and I think with Star Wars Land, for the first couple of months, it's going to be almost impossible to get in. But anyway, they gave some more details also on the ride, the Millennium Falcon ride, and that you're going to control it as a team, which means when you go on, everybody will get a different job in the cockpit. Which it reminds me of their Mission Space ride at Epcot, which isn't that popular because it's actually unfortunately killed some people. So I hope that they fixed the safety issues that they had with that ride. I don't really know how I feel about having to operate the Millennium Falcon. I think that might be fun like one time, but I feel like with a ride, we'll see how good the technology is. Maybe it's amazing and you'll actually feel like you're piloting it. But when I did Mission Space, I haven't ridden it since it has unfortunately and tragically killed people. But they were like, oh, it's time to launch, push this button. And you were like, I'm not 5, and I don't even know if today's sophisticated 5-year-olds would be interested in that. So we'll see how it turns out. But what I thought was particularly interesting is that if you mess up, the park will remember how you did. So if you did a really great job or a really bad job, that would be reflected in your park experience through the rest of the day. And maybe even when you returned. So that to me means that it'll be either in other ride interactions, for instance, if there's an interactive quality where something comes up to you or there's an expression or something is said, they can have pre-recorded things, and when your vehicle goes by, it can either be like, oh, hey, there's the person who crashed the Millennium Falcon earlier today. And they can be pre-recorded to just go off based on who's passing. And then also cast members could perhaps interact with you when you're passing them online. They could be like, oh, hey, great job today. You did a great time on the Millennium Falcon ride. High five. And you'll be like, oh, thank you. Now, how will they know who did what? it's Magic Band technology. Magic Band technology is something that they have at Disney World. I don't think they've introduced something similar to that yet at Universal Studios theme parks, but basically they tell you, they're like, oh, it's so great, you don't have to like carry around like a ticket or fast pass things. Everything's digitally stored on your wristband. It's also how you can pay for everything. It's actually great. You know, it opens your hotel room door. It's really fun to just run around, you know, just with a wristband on and not really need it to have anything else with you. However, the great thing for Disney World is that it can track where you go, where you spend your time, it's like playing Roller Coaster Tycoon, but for real. So you can track everyone on your little board and be like, okay, you spent this amount of time here, you went in the shop, but you didn't buy anything, because I know what you purchased because it's your wallet. It's absolutely fascinating. It's really, really cool. But I think they want to continue to make you be like, well, you know, because some people are like, I know what you're up to. I'm not going to participate in this corporate machine. So they're like, but don't you want people to know how you did on Star Wars? You're not going to get the real experience if you don't wear this Magic Band. And you're like, okay, you can see what I did in the park if someone will give me a high five for totally doing an awesome job with the Millennium Falcon. So really interesting. Technology, love it. All right. So the viewer question of the day comes from BTT viewer Thomas Mann. And Thomas says, question regarding product placement in movies. I picked this because I have an example from The Fate of the Furious. So Thomas Mann says, how does it work? Do they have to cover up all the brands and logos if they don't have a contract with these companies? Or is it just for free if they show it? Nowadays, everything has a big logo or something on it, and it seems complicated to avoid them. Well, first of all, you can see that they have a lot of money in budgets, and they've become very good with VFX these days. And so I don't think it's that hard to go in there. I mean, they visually, I mean, this was an article that was talked about, I'd say maybe 1 or 2 years ago, where they will they will digitally take out any lines or imperfections in actors' face and kind of give them like a digital facelift throughout the entire movie. Because they were like, it was an interesting article because they were like, some actors don't want to do it, but then when they find out that their co-star has done it and how bad they look next to their digitally altered co-star, they have to do it too. It's just like, you know how photos are photo touched, you know, cover photos in magazines, and that was a big controversy for a while. Well, apparently they do the same thing in movies. So if you can do that, you can easily cover up a billboard. Now, you might be like, well, why pay for that? Why do that? Well, I think it's a couple of reasons. One, maybe a brand doesn't want to be associated with your movie. You know, your movie might be awesome, but the brand might be like, it's not on brand. So they could sue and demand that you remove their logo from your film. I think if you're like in Times Square or something, you know, they pay to get exposure. But even then, I think they'd be like, I don't want to be in your movie. You know, and also I feel that in addition to having a potential negative reaction from the company for being included in the film, I think the studio goes, I'm not giving that away for free, because then people will be like, why should I ever do a product placement deal if I can just, you know, pay for a really nice billboard that ends up being in a lot of movies. So sometimes in movies, they will actually cover up the billboards that exist with someone who paid for product placement. So, and I think, so if you don't see a logo, and it's actually not that hard to cover them up, you know, you can turn a can around, you can turn around a box of cereal, and for the other things, you can digitally replace it. So so in The Fate of the Furious, the reason I'm bringing that up is that you might recall that the van that covered up Dom during when he, you know, his clandestine meeting, I don't want to give too much away, but in New York City, it's a Manhattan mini storage van. They don't even do a good job showing the logo, but it's a Manhattan mini storage van. And the thing is, that logo doesn't have to be there. It could have just been a nondescript van that pulled in there. That was for money. And I looked it up, but there was no cross promotion with Manhattan Mini Storage, unfortunately. Sometimes when there's a product in a movie, they'll do a cross promotion deal, you know, where they'll like put that, like for instance, don't be surprised if you see like a Dr. Pepper in Justice League, right? Because Dr. Pepper does DC movie skins on their cans, right? So you do a cross promotion thing, and they're like, oh, go see this in theaters and drink Dr. Pepper. And then Bruce Wayne's like, I love Dr. Pepper. And they're like, aha. Or he doesn't have to say it. He just has to have it on the Batcave table, right? Or in the Bat fridge. So that's sometimes how it works with cross promotion. So again, it's an opportunity to get money, and you just reach out, because, you know, if there's going to be a logo there, why not make some money off of it? So anytime you see a logo, there was money exchanged. And again, if the logo's there and there wasn't a money exchange, they didn't get the permission, it opens them up for too much of a problem, right? Maybe, who knows? So that's the way it works. They go out to the companies, they do a deal. I'm not quite sure. Sometimes I would think it would make sense maybe to do an overall brand deal with the studio, with the company, and be like, we'll feature Kellogg's cereal in all the Universal movies, for instance, maybe. But that's just the way it works. And if you see someone drinking like a nondescript item or eating something that you don't see what it is, oftentimes you'll notice on computers, on laptops, they'll cover up the logo because they're like, it's not a product placement deal. That's totally the reason why. So I hope that answers your question, Thomas. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and have fun looking for logos in movies. So write down below your reaction to today's top 3 stories. Thomas, is a viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.